All right. Check. Is the mains turned up on the board? Huh. Check. There we go. All right. Well, good evening and welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. Tonight is kind of a unique one. Not that they all haven't been a little bit interesting, but tonight is an interesting one because the series is continuing on. 3 very big mistakes people made and what God did about them. And so as we've gone through a couple of them, we're like, is that really the big mistake, or is that really the person I would have chose to have as a landmark mistake in the Bible? And tonight is one that I just kind of had to go, I didn't see that one coming. We actually move into the New Testament. Does anybody want to guess who they chose to make a very big mistake and what God did about it in the New Testament? Now we're just going into the New Testament. Yep. Samson? Oh, we've passed Samson, so it's not Samson now. We're moving forward. Not Judas yet, nope. Not Zechariah, which that would have been a good one. Judas would have been a good one. Huh? Peter? Nope, that would have been a really good. Look at all these really good ones that we just didn't even think about. It's actually the teachers of the law. Well, that's kind of what I said, is people can be a plural, and it's a group of people that, so teachers of the law, some Pharisees, things like that, they just kind of lumped them together and said, this was a very big mistake. And I'm going to say, yeah, it was. Yeah, okay. So we are going to read Matthew 23. Matthew 23, the whole chapter. Because it is one thing after another about Jesus teaching and them trying to trap him. So it says, then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders. But they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels on their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to be called rabbi by others. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you have one teacher, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called instructors, for you have one instructor, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be your servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You shut the door of the kingdom of heaven and on people's faces, but you yourself do not enter, nor will you let those enter who are trying to. So see, Jesus is correcting them. We're seeing this because throughout the rest of Scripture, and especially in the Gospels, we keep seeing that the teachers of the law and the Pharisees are always trying to trap Jesus. That's their whole goal in life, is they're going to try to get him in something that they can use against him. And I've explained this before, and you might already know this, but of course, we can all agree, I think, that Jesus never sinned. If you say, well, he might have, then let's go back to Hebrews and start reading again. But he did not sin. And so they keep accusing him of breaking the law. Breaking the law would have been a sin. And so they keep saying, you're breaking the law here. You're breaking the law with this. You're breaking the law with this. And he keeps saying, no, this is what it really says. And so as we move through the whole narrative of the Gospels, they keep doing that to him. You're breaking the law. You're breaking the law. You're breaking the law. And he keeps saying, no, this is what it really says. And that's what we got here is Jesus is saying, these people tell you what you have to believe and what you have to do and what you have to stay away from, and they themselves are not doing it. They tell you how to do these things of the law, and they can't even live up to some of these things. Jesus knew the law. Jesus wrote the law, so he knew the law. But what had happened over time was the interpretation by man of those laws became what they were following more than Scripture itself. So they had what the Scripture says, then they looked at it and said, so what does this really mean? The rabbis and the teachers of the law sat down and they deciphered it and said, this is what it means. And the meaning written by these rabbis and stuff is what they were following rather than the original intent of the law. It's what it had become through their interpretation. That's what they kept trying to trap Jesus in. Is, you have broken the Sabbath by doing this. And Jesus says, that's not what it says. This is what the law says. This is what you've added. This is your interpretation of it. You've interpreted what work means. You've interpreted what a Sabbath day means. You've interpreted these things. And that's what they kept trying to trap Jesus in. Of course, he never broke the law. He was just interpreting it back the way it was originally written and the way it was meant to be written. So these guys keep doing it. And Jesus gets a great chance here to kind of turn it back on them a little bit, if you want to say. And he says, that's not what the law says at all. As a matter of fact, these guys that keep telling you that, they're a bunch of hypocrites. They're not living these things. They want to be seen by the public. They want to have all the nicest things in life. They want to be seen praying loud. They want to be seen putting their offerings in the plates. They want to be seen saying these prayers on the corners and stuff. And so everybody will look to them and go, oh man, look at how holy they are. But inside, they're not holy. Outside, they look great. They use the word phylacteries in here, which is not a great word. But it's the way they've interpreted it here in this scripture. But what they're talking about is the tefillin and how they want them to be wide and big. Those are the boxes they would wear on their foreheads and on their arms. And they want to make sure they have the biggest ones so people know that when they put them on, they're honoring God. Well, again, that's kind of an interpretation of what they took the scriptures to mean when it says to bind them on your hearts and your minds. And so they did this. And they want their tassels on the corner of their garments to be long, because they are required by the law to wear tassels on the four corners of their garment. And so they want them to be as big and long and everything, so people look at them and go, oh, look how holy they are. Aren't they just magnificent? Man, they've got all the right things. Big prayer shawls, fancy garments. They walk around and expect people to step aside when they come through. They want people to bow to them a little bit. And they go, man, they've got that religion stuff down. But Jesus says that's not what it's about. You demand all this stuff, but in doing that, you're slamming the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's face. You're blocking them from having that relationship with God because of your religion. So it goes on and it says, Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You travel over land and sea to win a single convert. Then, when you have succeeded, you make them twice as much a child of hell as you are. You go travel all over to find the right person to come into your midst, to come and learn your ways, to come and be just like you, and then you train them to be more a teacher of tradition than of the actual law. You make them you plus. And so you train them to keep people away from God. Woe to you, blind guides! You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing. But anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by that oath. He's saying you've made the relationship and the connection with God a secondary thing to the wealth and the opulence of the temple. Prayer is a secondary thing. We see that when he overturns the temple. He says, or overturns the tables. He says, this is to be a house of prayer, and you've made it a den of thieves. Their oath to God did not mean near as much as their oath to the gold of the temple, because their focus was on the possession. It was on the status, it was on the place, it was on the money, it was on the everything. Even the temple itself, how grand it is, rather than God, who the temple was built for them to worship. And so they missed it. And Jesus is seeing this more and more. And so he goes on and he says, you blind fools, which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing. But if anyone who swears by the gift on the altar is bound by an oath. What is more important, the altar of God or the gift that's placed on it? I mean, throughout Scripture we see that God is much more interested and much more concerned with our obedience and our relationship with Him than some gift we put on the altar. In case you haven't figured it out, God doesn't need your money. We give it as an act of worship, and we use that so that we can further the church and stuff here. But God's not going bankrupt anytime soon, because He doesn't need our money. He doesn't need the things of this earth. He created all of this. So there's nothing that we have that God is sitting around saying, boy, if I just had that. It's all His. And He says, and you're worried about the gift more than you are the altar that you're putting it on. You're worried more about what you're giving and how people are going to perceive it than who you're giving it to. That doesn't make sense. It says, you blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? Therefore, anyone who swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And anyone who swears by the temple swears by it and by the one who dwells in it. And anyone who swears by heaven swears by God's throne and by the one who sits on it. Oh, wow. That's more serious. He says, you guys have missed it so much. You have made your whole life about following your interpretation of the law and the religion you have built around it. You've missed God. You've missed that focus on Him because you're too concerned about whether you're doing it right. You are more concerned about how far you walk on the Sabbath than whether you keep the Sabbath for its right purpose. You've made the Sabbath the object rather than the person that God created the Sabbath for. You've just got it all switched around. And that's something that people sometimes still do to this day. We get so focused on religion that we forget about who we're worshiping. We make the show more than the worship. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. We're more worried about whether everything flows perfectly than whether or not people are actually coming before God. Man, but it went great. Okay. That's one of the things that, sometimes I'll have people come in, they'll go, oh, like the kids or something. Oh, man, we had a great service Sunday. It was great. We really worshiped. I said, awesome. So what was the message? Oh, I don't know. Well, what songs did you sing that brought you to such a great place of worship? I don't know. But it was great. We had a great time. And I'm like, oh, okay. But you don't remember anything about the experience. Maybe they just were so caught up in the Spirit they didn't remember it. But it's like, I don't understand that who were you worshiping and what was your worship focused on and pointed towards? Oh, we just had a great day. Okay. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You give a tenth of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you have neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. This is something that I think can be very easily fallen into as a trap. Again, things that we can do, works, gifts, whatever, giving of those gifts. It's really easy for us to say, make sure you are giving your tithe, make sure you are doing this, make sure you are doing these acts of service, but yet we don't love each other. We don't show mercy. We don't show justice or faithfulness. And again, in religion, that looks great. In a relationship with Christ, it kind of falls flat. It's like, is it really a part of who you are if you don't have the fruit of the Spirit within you? If you're not showing God to the people around you, then how deep does that go? Oh, but I've done all the great things in my life. I've done all these things, and I've done all these nice things for people, and I've given this much to the church, and yeah, but you don't care about your neighbor. And you treat people like dirt. Oh, well, that, and it's like, what's the important thing here? You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. He says, give your tithe. That's what the law says to do. Give a tenth of all those things. But don't neglect your neighbor. Don't neglect the people. Don't neglect your family. Don't neglect those things. But not in a sense of, here's my requirement of the law, but in, this is how I now act because I have a relationship with God. And that's the biggest thing that Jesus kept getting back at the Pharisees with, is you know all the laws. There's no question about that. You know all the right things to say and all the right things to do and all the right ways to act when you get to the temple or when you get to the Sanhedrin or when you get to whatever. You know exactly what's expected of you. But do you know God? Has his word penetrated your heart? Has it changed who you are? It says, you blind guides, you strain out a gnat, but swallow a camel. There's a great image, isn't it? Don't want to eat that gnat, but you swallow a camel. He says, in other words, you're so worried about the little nitpicky things. Did that person walk one step further than they should have on the Sabbath? But yet you're overlooking these huge parts of Scripture and we just neglect them because, we just don't worry about that. He says, man, look at these big problems. Like, again, the fact that you come and you worship, but you don't even know who you're worshiping. Because you don't know who God is, because you've folded him back into all the traditions of religion. And you really don't even have any kind of a relationship. It says, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. So if you kind of think about that old coffee cup. Don't worry about cleaning out the inside, but man, make sure the outside's shiny. And he says that's kind of what it is you guys, you have this greed and self-indulgence inside of you, but boy, you look great on the outside. Blind Pharisees. First clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You are like whitewashed tombs, which look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. It says, look at the tombs. They look great on the outside. Man, they are kept up. Look at how ornate and beautiful the tombs of some of these people that have gone before us are. But you know what it's inside? Nothing. Dead men's bones, uncleanness, things that if you even come in contact with, you can't even then go into the temple because you're unclean until the next morning. You got to go cleanse yourself. You got to do this stuff. And yet you look at the outside and go, look how magnificent it is. You can go to the Kidron Valley today and see some of these tombs that are still standing. Huge monolithic tombs. And they look really cool even 2,000 years later. But you know what? They don't have much in them. I watched a documentary and it was kind of interesting. I think Mike and Margaret have seen the same one where they found the tomb of Caiaphas. And they went in and said, this is the tomb of Caiaphas. We found this inscription. You walk into this tomb, and inside of a tomb, there's like carvings and stuff on the ceiling and on the walls, and everything is beautiful in there. And the floor was done, and every inch of that tomb was done at great expense and at the finest labor they could get. And they said, and now we found it. Let's go in it today. It's a goat barn. Because the people who live in that area now don't even know who Caiaphas was. And so the biblical scholars go there to find Caiaphas' tomb. And the shepherds go, hey, what are you doing in my barn? Get out of there, you're disturbing my goats. And that's what it was. Floor covered with straw and droppings. All the ornate things fading away. Dark, nothing. His sarcophagus, his ossuary, they're gone. Nobody cares. Why do they care? Like I said, the people who live there now, he means nothing to them. And that's what Jesus is saying is, look how grand it was when it was built. Look at how great. And now it's a goat barn. And what was inside of it in between? Something that made you unclean. It had no value. And like I said, it's kind of crazy because we put so much emphasis on that. And it's also ironic that Caiaphas is one of the people that Jesus is explaining this to. And now we see what's come of his tomb. He says, it's nothing. You guys putting the wrong emphasis on the wrong stuff. In the same way, on the outside you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You build tombs for the prophets and decorate the graves of the righteous. And you say, if we had lived in the days of our ancestors, we would not have taken part with them in shedding the blood of the prophets. So you testify against yourselves that you are the descendants of those who murdered the prophets. That, I'm sure, made them really happy. Because he says, you're claiming, oh, if I would have been here, I would have never put the prophets to death. And again, you can go up on the Mount of Olives and see some prophets' tombs. And, they said, if we would have been here, that's why we're keeping them up and making them nice, because we would have never shed the blood of the prophets. And he goes, oh, really? Well, who shed the blood of the prophets? Well, our ancestors, but we wouldn't have done that. Oh, so you've admitted that you are the descendants of those who shed the bloods of the prophets. Yeah. So you're telling me that that's your lineage. It's your family that did this. And it was such an ironic thing because, again, they are so profound about everything they know about the law. Let me tell you everything about the law. But yet, the people who brought them the messages from God, they put to death. Jesus himself, they didn't recognize. Those who knew all the prophecies of all those prophets didn't even recognize the Messiah when he came and stood before them. Didn't want to hear it. Even though he fit the description of the prophecies, he didn't fit their interpretation of what those prophecies should say. So therefore, you're not it. You meet all the criteria, but not once we put our spin on it, so you can't be it. And they ignored him. Go ahead then and complete what your ancestors started. You snakes, you brood of vipers, how will you escape being condemned to hell? Now, this is a foreshadowing of Jesus' own death. He said, you've admitted that your ancestors, when the prophets came to them, they shed their blood. They put them to death because they didn't like the message they brought. And now I've come to you, and that's what this is going to come to essentially. He says, you're continuing on the family tradition here because I'm bringing the message of God. And just like your ancestors, you don't want to hear it, so you want me put to death. Keep up the good work. He says, if that's the case, how do you expect to escape being condemned to hell? You're saying you're the only ones that can bring man to God, and you don't know who God is. And you are leading people away from God rather than to him. You have no relationship with him, yet you claim to be his spokespeople. How does that make sense? Therefore, I am sending you prophets and sages and teachers. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Others you will flog in your synagogues and pursue from town to town. And so upon you will come all the righteous blood that has been shed on earth, from the blood of the righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, son of Berechiah, whom you murdered between the temple and the altar. Truly I tell you, all this will come on this generation. Excuse me. So he says, more prophets are coming, more sages, more people sent here by God to tell you the truth, and you're going to persecute them. You're going to put them to death. You're going to crucify them. Again, a foreshadowing of his own death. He says, these are the things that you're going to do to the people who come with the true message of God, and yet you claim to be the messengers of God. And you're missing it. It's right before you. So I can see why they said these were pretty bad mistakes, to say the least. Again, it wasn't what I thought of initially when I think of name the top 13 biggest mistakes in Scripture. But you know, when you break it down and talk about it, that was a pretty big one. They missed the Messiah. They missed the one they were preparing the way for. They missed the one that they had been waiting for generations to see. And they had all the road markings. They had everything that pointed to him. They were told, this is him. And all they could think of is, this is not the way we had it planned, so no. He's going to upset what we have going in our religion. And if we listen to him, we're going to lose what we have already established. So the message I think that we can really get from this is, We need to make sure that in our quest for that relationship with Christ, that we don't forget Christ. That we don't get so religious or so into practice or routine that we forget who we are worshiping or why we're doing it. You can read the Bible every day, but if you don't recognize Christ in it, you're missing it. This is to draw us closer to him. When I read the Old Testament, I can't help but think of Christ and why he had to come. I mean, it's easy enough to think about my own sins and the sins of this world right now and say, that's why Jesus had to come. But I can't read the Old Testament without thinking about that. I can't read it without putting Christ into it through the person of God as well and say, this is what was leading ultimately to Christ. And so everything is pointing to him, and that needs to be our focus as that we're looking at it. Be careful here. There was a church activity where young people were encouraged to memorize Scripture. It was very popular. Still exists. That's why I'm being careful. Memorize Scripture. And so I talked to some of the people who were leading that group, and I said, so how do you bring in the practical application? And they went, oh my gosh, no. Don't try to teach them practical application. And they even said, don't teach from the books that we are studying. I said, oh, okay. I thought you would want to kind of coordinate some of that stuff so they would have more exposure to it. They said, oh, absolutely not. Please do not teach at all. Sunday school, youth groups, anything. Don't teach on the books that we are studying for this tournament, because you're going to teach them application and they're not going to memorize it exactly. They can't paraphrase and they can't say it in their own words. So please do not teach it, because we don't want them to internalize it. We want them to know it, to puke it back on a piece of paper or to hit a buzzer fast enough. And I went, oh, okay. Would you like to get involved and help us? Absolutely not. I want nothing to do with it. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying that it's been bad for people. But I don't understand how you can say we need to memorize Scripture. Just make sure you don't cloud it with application. Don't cloud it with a personal change. What we want is rote memory with absolutely no meaning. And I went, okay, I'm out. I'm just like, this is ridiculous. And I understand the principle behind it, but it just makes no sense to me. And sometimes we do that same thing in religion. We say, don't question it, just do it this way. But it's like, but how is that leading us to a deeper relationship with Christ? How is that changing me? Not just what I can show, not just that I can wear the right t-shirt or have the right bumper sticker on my car or anything like that, but how does it change me so that I can demonstrate Christ to people around me? That's why we read this. Not to just impress somebody because we can go through the words. We read it so it can change us, so that we can have a relationship with God even when it's messy. Don't worry about looking right. Worry about having the right relationship. Besides, it takes too much effort to look nice. I'd rather worry about the other things and not look like the whitewashed tomb. Perfect on the outside, but nothing on the inside. So, all right. Matthew 23. Good stuff. With that, we're going to say Thank you for coming to the people at home. Thank you for tuning in. And we will see you on Sunday. Again, you're always welcome to come visit in person, but we'll see you Sunday.